television highlights of the news of yesteryear.
Rise of the Reds in Russia. Petrograd in March 1917. Scene of the end of the reign of the Romanovs. In February, when workers and soldiers rose against the Tsarists, Nicholas II abdicated in favor of his brother Michael, who refused the throne, and a provisional government was headed by social revolutionary Alexander Kerensky. Russia went wild. This was the new Soviet. This the intermediary step which brought Nikolai Lenin into prominence and boosted Bolshevism into power. Kerensky's war policies met with opposition, and aroused populace demanded still more changes. Cossack speakers harangued crowds calling for immediate action, calling for Bolshevik members of the Soviet to refuse to back the provisional government. Lenin arrived from Switzerland, sponsored by the Germany that hoped to see him lead Russia into a separate peace. "80,000 Bolshevik party members came out into the open to back Lenin and his co-leader, Leon Trotsky. Associated in the party as General Secretary is the man who was to direct the destinies of Russia. This was Joesph Stalin in 1917. In an effort to negate the influence of Lenin, Trotsky, and Bolshevism, Kerensky called a meeting of the All-Russia Conference at the Bolshoi Theater in Moscow. Delegate Avgenstchev and others heard Kerensky declare that Lenin had inspired organized anti-war propaganda. For the time being, Kerensky won his point. But on November 17, 1917, the Bolsheviki rose in riot. Armed mobs stormed the Winter Palace, seeking Kerensky, who fled. Months of preparation were culminated in this dramatic climax to Lenin's revolution. Moscow had already fallen. These actual scenes in Petrograd and these filmed in Moscow after it had fallen to the Reds marked the historic advent into power of the Bolsheviks. Lenin had returned late in October from Finland to take over. Petrograd was to be renamed Leningrad in his honor. Scene of fierce fighting was the Kremlin, which shows the marks of rifle and artillery fire. The red flag flies over the Kremlin. With capitulation to his rule all over Russia, Lenin waited only a few months to begin his first purge of the Russian Communist Party. The Red Army was a peasant army, and Lenin's precept that party membership should border on fanaticism met with some opposition, but this was quickly quelled. From this point on, communism and the Soviet Union joined hands in complete accord. The army, ready to back Lenin to the limit. Then, January 1924, the hand that held all Russia relinquished its grasp. Nikolai Lenin was dead. Leon Trotsky, partner in the plan of the communist coup, was away from Moscow at the time, and shortly after, Kalinin, Kamenev, and Stalin bore the leader's coffin toward the House of Unions. Stalin made his move. Up till now, General Secretary of the party, he had steadily forced Trotsky to the background during Lenin's illness, and this was his big opportunity. While party leaders paid last respects to the dead leader, while Lenin's sister and his wife, Nadezhda Krupskaya, stand in sorrow by his bier, while his followers all over Russia mourned his passing, Joesph Stalin assumed place as the new Red leader. It took him 3 years to drive Trotsky into exile, but he succeeded. It took years more to expose and eliminate the secret network of government opposition Trotsky had left behind. But by 1938, Stalin was in supreme command. His 5-year plan, begun in 1928 to wipe out the last vestige of capitalism, was functioning. His armies were large and well-equipped. This was communism. This was Joesph Stalin.
Just in case you thought Rosie the Riveter was born in World War II, yesterday's newsreel presents her predecessor of World War I, Golda Wessel, woman war worker from Oakland, California, who took over when her husband went to fight and became Sally the Steeplejack. Chimneys have to be climbed to be cleaned, and Mrs. Wessel tackles the task like a veteran. Time off from repairs for repairs. After all, a gal never can tell whom she'll meet at the top of a chimney, can she now? And then it's chow time. No knocking off for an hour when Sally Steeplejack's on the job. Yes, sir, Golda Wessel eats the melon, but in my opinion, she takes the cake.
Paris in 1921, and Rudyard Kipling, English poet and setter, receives Doctorate of Literature degree from Sorbonne University. It was Kipling's pen that produced classics like Road to Mandalay, Kim, and Gunga Din.
How about the girl on the left, movie fans? Well, on the right now with the Tommy Hitchcocks, it's Maybell Normand. She made Dad laugh before the movies learned to talk. Just for the records, her first big film was Mickey, released in 1918. So long, Maybell.
America's most famous composer of operettas. This is Victor Herbert, photographed in 1924 with Norma Talmadge and Wallace Beery. With Guy Bates Post, here is the composer of Babes in Toyland, Our Sweet Mystery of Life, and Kiss Me Again.
October 18th, 1931, and Thomas Alva Edison is dead. Workers at his Orange, New Jersey plant in last respects to the man whose inventive genius freed the world from darkness. Born in Marlin, Ohio in 1847, his 74th birthday found him honored by his associates. This is the man whose entire education consisted of 3 months in a public school, but whose accomplishments in science are world-renowned and recognized. You are watching genius, the tremendous combination of ability, foresight, and perseverance that characterized Edison the man. With Mrs. Edison here, and with naturalist John Burroughs and Harvey Firestone in this picture, you are watching a great man in one of the few moments of relaxation he allowed himself. But even while physically at ease, the Edison mind was working on some new idea from which the world would benefit. This was the very first instrument to imprison and reproduce the human voice. Edison and his phonograph. And this, the incandescent light, developed in 1879. It's difficult to conceive of our world without his contributions. Impossible to pay sufficient tribute to Thomas Alva Edison, whose mortal light faded, but whose memory remains forever bright.
Evening gowns in 1936 brought out the best in a woman, particularly this ivory-spun velvet with a not-too-delicate décolleté, starring diamond-decorated shoulder straps. Uneven hemline caused Madame to watch her step. You can watch anything you like. Another evening ensemble, this a black velvet creation, gathered at the side and pinned by rose garlands. The off-the-shoulder effect is heightened by a single string of pearls. Initial influence of the pajama in stay-out nights life. Steel beads stud this sparkling style. The neckline's low, and the entire effect extremely attractive. 1936's suggestion for a real nocturnal outfit. Black fox-trimmed evening coat on the left covers a white chiffon formal with beaded decoration. Stunning, isn't it? In fact, I'd say it was something extra special to look back on.
It's Lakehurst, 1933, and tragedy is about to make a takeoff. The ship you are watching is the Akron, veteran of 1,500 hours in the air, photographed immediately before its final journey. Last view of New York Harbor seen by the 73 men who perished on the flight. Executive Officer Wiley is on board the Akron as it soars out to sea and disaster. Reported missing some hours later off the Jersey coast, the fate of the Akron crew is in doubt as the Navy dispatched its J-3 blimp to search for the distressed dirigible and possible survivors. All that is known is that the Akron hit the center of a severe electrical storm, and the J-3, off in a rescue attempt, becomes a second victim of the elements as high winds tear it from the skies. Although the J-3 is destroyed, a German tanker is discovered and saved from the sea, 3 of the 76 men on board the Akron. Arriving here at Brooklyn Navy Yard are crew members Field on stretcher, Irwin wrapped in a blanket who walks behind, and Wiley, executive officer of the Akron. 3 men who defied doom and lived, sole survivors of the ill-fated $8 million airship, the Akron.
It's September 2nd, 1931, and the icy waters of Lake Ontario and Toronto are churned by 180 swimmers out after $15,000 in prize money offered by William Rigby Jr. for the winner of the 15-mile course. It takes stamina to stay in that water, and it isn't long before more than 100 of the starters drop out to be picked up by trailing boats. Local lad George Young, who won the Catalina swim 4 years before, is staying with this one to the finish. And there he is, being pulled into his boat, the winner. Well, he's cold now, but that $15,000 will do a lot to warm up George, by George.
It's still cold in 1936, especially at the Winter Olympics, where America's entry in the 2-man bobsled run gets underway. There she goes with Brown and Washbond taking the curves in high. Olympic honors are in the offing as the Americans ride the dangerous curves and come through to win the championship for the USA.